everyone, it's Ruth,
Acacia,
and Blythe.
We're from Articulation. We're executive communication coaches that love to talk about speaking. And today we're doing something completely different that we've never done before because we thought it was finally worth it to have a little, not quite a book club, not quite a book review, but maybe just like a reflection. So we chose this new book by, ready everyone? Samara Bay. Samara, we don't know you, but we think you did an amazing job with your book, and we hope that the listeners that follow us will enjoy our review of it. So, Blythe, Acacia, any other comments to start us off?
it's just great to see a book out there that's focused on this instrument that we have, our voice, and is not written for a professional voice user. It's really written for all of us who have to use our voice every day, and particularly a lens to women and other underrepresented people. It's really great.
Yeah, I have not read as many books as the two of you have about speaking, but this really does feel like it focuses so much on the instrument, although it does get into the emotions behind it and how you make that instrument sound more particularly one way or another. And so I really appreciate that about this book.
So let's just I'm going to ask Blythe and Acacia a few prompting questions here. We all have read the book start to finish, for the record. And the book has a really interesting construct to it, the way it's stacked. And that was one of Acacia's first reflections. So Acacia, tell us what you like about it. Sorry, my dogs are circling around me here.
Well, it felt to me as I read the book that she'd really stacked the chapters in order of sort of their importance to your voice. So she starts with breath, which, I mean, I did a lot of voice training, I know, as Blythe did. Breath really is that foundation of your speaking voice, and probably like everything in our lives, honestly. But she starts with breath, and then she starts stacking these ideas, and they each became like a different lever, is the way I looked at them, a lever that you could use in order to work on your presence when it comes to how you use your voice. And each lever had its own power, but definitely the first levers that she shared to me struck me as the most powerful levers when it comes to using your voice.
So Blythe, what were some of the levers for you in that first part that we've all exchanged some notes here, but
Yeah, it's so interesting. The chapter, I had forgotten what the chapter was called. That's why I had to go back and look at it. The second chapter is called Size, right? And it's about the size of your voice and controlling your voice because you've been told you're too loud, or amplifying your voice because you have a platform, or any of those things. And I'm not sure that I would have put size where she did, but in reflecting on what Acacia's saying, it actually starts to make sense, right? That size is one of the things that comes most directly from breath when I think about it, right? Because you either hold your breath and you get really quiet, or you can use your breath and you can get really loud. And the other lever that comes to mind specifically is the idea of tone, how she talks about tone. And Acacia, you referenced this in your notes, this idea of strength versus warmth.
mm-hmm.
And that one really stood out to me, I think, even more than any of the other ones.
What lever or levers stood out to you, Ruth?
Well, I'll build, not to repeat what the two of you have said, but in the early chapters, and a few of us shared this, the notions of warm versus cold climates, and how our voice is shaped, how our mouth is shaped by, if we're in a warm climate, we're going to have longer vowels because we're not as tight, if you will, if that's the right word to say it. But if you're in a tighter climate, like uptight, you're going to be a little bit more lockjawed. I had never considered that. And I'd never considered the notions of day or night language, which is sort of a bridge between the voice and language. And that really resonated because when you connect it back to content in the later chapter on words, our work is so centrally focused on how do we take ostensibly a thought, an idea, a concept, and often something that's written, and help people make that bridge into making it believable. And in fact, the best word that I think we all share on is, can we trust it? Is it in the way we're speaking it? And where does that trust really come from? And so those were some of the, I went back and forth, but some of the levers that were really interesting to me, that concepts I hadn't considered yet in the role of being a speaker coach.
Yeah. I kept thinking, and what you were talking about really brought to me the big idea of your voice being a choice.
Mm-hmm.
And there are kind of two lenses I want to point to with that. One is that for most of us, our voice is actually just a collection of habits, and that there's a way to also honor that. What I really appreciated in the book, she talked about honoring where these things have come from when you do these things habitually with your voice. Like you said, those people who maybe open their mouth a lot more in warmer climates because it helps them cool off, and in colder climates, they close their mouth more.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you can honor that, and you can honor things like the way in which you speak because of your culture or your upbringing, but then also acknowledging that a habit that's unexamined is worth examining. And you can actually make a choice whether you think that habit is going to serve you in the environment that you're going into. And you have the power to make that choice with your voice. It's not somebody else's voice. It's not inauthentic. It's just a different version of yourself. And I really love that concept.
I thought she was really good about telling people that their voice is good as it is.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That message came through really clearly. And she didn't say, you should be changing all of these things. She acknowledged the spectrum, I think really in every chapter. And she said, this might speak to this, or it might speak to this, but there was no judgment in it. And I actually really appreciated that about her writing.
I'll just build on that note, Blythe. The one thing that really challenged an assumption or a stereotype that I've had for many, many years, and it speaks to this, like, we appreciate who you are, regardless of who you are, that we're working within your voice, not trying to create a new one, was actually the notion of upspeak. I've always considered upspeak to be diminutive. And she introduced an exception to that rule. While it is true in a lot of instances, she got me to really appreciate how upspeak invites others in. And it's true. When you have an upspeak moment, it might end in a question, which then allows the audience to see themselves as a character or participant in that dialogue, even if you're on stage and there isn't a call and response specifically. I thought that was helpful.
You actually had a moment of upspeak that you just used, Ruth, when you said she invited something new, and your voice went up. Mm-hmm. Because it was like new information and this sort of invitation to new knowledge. You did it naturally, which is a lot of what she talks about. And the fact that what can often get in our way is this hiding that we do of our voice.
Correct.
It's the way in which we don't give ourselves permission to be fully ourselves, that then things sound weird to our audience as well, because your voice naturally did upspeak because it was the right thing to do in that moment.
Because I'm still learning when to use it, right? I'm just kidding. It was intentional. But on that note, Acacia and I shared a video this morning with a client. We don't share names, we share behaviors, who we recognized immediately didn't have permission to speak in this video that looked teleprompter read and forced, and she looked like she was a little trapped. And we know this person to be extremely, extremely smart and a great leader. And it's really contrary to the way we would have wanted to hear her speak, because we know her real voice. Blythe in a text said about vowels and consonants, and we love to talk about words themselves. We care a lot about emotion, and we care about tonality and breath, but the words themselves. So before I lose my voice, Talk to us more about the consonants and vowels that you walked away with.
So I forget exactly what she said. And of course, I think I made a note in the margin, but she started to talk specifically about the vowels and the consonants, right? That as we are warming up our articulators, it's important to know where these things lie in our mouth, in our throat, in our face, and where those sounds exist. And I connected that to something I learned in studying and performing Shakespeare, which is that the emotions live in the vowels, the O's, the ahs, the uhs, right? That's where you can fill those words with feeling. By the way, as a side note, I love how she distinguished between emotion and feeling. That was really important for me to hear and read and learn. And that the action comes in the consonants, the k, the g, the b, right? That's when you can spit at someone with a p and a t, right? You can do something to someone with your consonants. And that's a very sort of technical, classical language sort of thing, but I do think it applies in everyday language as well, particularly as we're choosing the words we use. And another thing that I really liked about what she said in choosing words is that, and I was thinking about this as you were talking about your client who was on a teleprompter, when we are speaking spontaneously, the words are filled with so much more honesty and authenticity than if we are reading from a teleprompter. So I just conflated a bunch of ideas into one, but all of those things are sort of connected in my mind.
I'll just jump off of the consonants issue. Last night, I might have dropped an F-bomb, frustrated at something. And when I did, I realized she's right. Like those hard consonants, the f and the k are almost soothing.
They're satisfying.
It feels like you're doing something about the thing that is bothering you.
But let's take this back to our clients. And what is if somebody was to read the book or not have time to read the book, let's just do a round robin as to what's the one thing that we really walked away with that we didn't know before, having been practitioners in this space for a long time?
I'm going to pick one. It's hard to pick one, Ruth, but I know that, as she says in the book, it's common for us as well. One of the most common things people want to talk to us about are nerves. And as coaches, we're also constantly trying to get them to share something of themselves, to tell personal stories. And they struggle with feeling like they have permission to do that. And in the book, she talks about that the problem she sees that when people deal with those issues is the same, actually. It's that on some level, a person doesn't feel worthy of being seen or heard. And so they have this reaction to that sense of worth. And so I think for our clients or anyone watching this who's not our client, if you experience those things, it might be worth taking some time to think about how you can behave and act more confidently for yourself. Because confidence, as she says, is an active thing. It is not a feeling. It's actually a verb. How did she name it?
Act of generosity.
It means literally, the root of it is to have full trust. So
Correct.
if you want to be confident, you have to have full trust in yourself. And there's no shortcut to that. It's work everyone has to do on their own. But I think that's important for people to hear.
And Blythe, I want to go to you, but my insight was just connected deeply to Acacia's. I'm coaching a group right now, preparing for something I can't say. And there is doubt about the leadership that's connecting some organizations around how this particular presentation is going to go. And, I had to stop the client and say, you don't have trust in this partnership. You don't have trust yet in where this is headed. You can't speak to this yet. If in a week you were invited to talk about this partnership, you'd have to be honest and say it's not formed. You cannot make it up as you go along. And for me, the book helped to give me that, is it the duende, the shape of why that mattered so much in that conversation, that we speak from trust and from truth. And while that might sound a little trite, when we see speakers who really believe in themselves and their language, they're a lot easier to coach than if those that don't. And it also speaks to the question I get frequently, which is, what do I do when I'm given a deck that I didn't write and I have to present it? And my answer always is give it back. Sorry. Anyway, Blythe, before I start coughing again, Blythe, what did you take away?
So for me, the biggest takeaway was this idea of how emotion can inform speaking. We work with a lot of speakers who say, I don't want to get emotional. Like, I'm worried I'm going to cry, or what do I do if this happens? And of course, we ask them to be vulnerable because we know from the outside that their vulnerability actually makes their speaking, their story, their talk, whatever it is, so much more alive to the audience, right? It gives them more connection points for that audience to empathize, to sympathize, to do whatever it is that they want them to do. But the book actually gave me a lot of, not fodder, but sort of support for what to say to someone when they're like, I'm worried about this. And now I feel like I can say, you shouldn't, because this is what it's allowing you to accomplish, right? I've always had a way to say that, but now I actually feel like I have even more support behind me to say, no, really, it's okay. It's okay to be emotional. It's okay to feel the way you're feeling in that moment of speaking publicly.
I went to, I'm a part of a little essay group, and the essayist last week delivered, now she was speaking it, but she was reading something she wrote, which is different than what we often are discussing here. And she filled the room with emotion that left well beyond. There was hardly a breath to be able to be had based on the story that she shared, but we all walked away so much. I mean, there were tears, sobbing, people sobbing. And we all walked away really informed and holding space for her, and holding space really for the emotion that was necessary to appreciate what her story was to that point. Like, if we hadn't gone there, it wouldn't have been a true story. It wouldn't have been earnest. I always like to say it's okay to cry when you're speaking, but it's not okay to keep crying. That bring me the emotion, bring me the feeling. But the audience also needs to know that there's a way to sort of bring them back to what the message is, and not just live in the tears. If that might sound a little harsh, but I think that we're always encouraging people to take that step, to feel something, because the audience wants them to. We want them to be human.
Yeah, that's what we want. We want to know that and it's not always a heavy emotion. Sometimes it's just letting people know you care about something, which, I mean, that is why it's vulnerable to do that. If you show that you really are passionate about the thing you're talking about and that you care about what you're talking about, there is risk in that. People could disagree with you. People could shut you down, but that's also what people are seeking when they're listening. They want to hear what you care about and what you're passionate about. So it's kind of it's a risk worth taking.
Well, I want to thank my esteemed and loyal and close colleagues, Blythe and Acacia, for going on this book journey. We'll see if we do this again. People are always asking us, what are your favorite books to read? I think this will be on the list for the reasons we just shared. Well, for the record, there are pieces of the book that we didn't love, but that's part of what writing a book is about, is you're like a speech or a TED Talk. There's something in it for everybody, but not everything is for everybody. So, but thank you, Samara, for bringing it to life. It looked like a labor of love, and we'll be referencing it and referring back to it for many years to come. So thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.